Whoa, that was fancy schmancy. I've never heard it say that before. Thank you. All right, girls, welcome to tonight's team call. I am super excited for Miss Katie to share a bit of her story. If you didn't see, she shared a big piece of her story that she hadn't shared with any of us up until this point, or her social media to put it out there in the public. And so, one, we applaud you for being brave and sharing that piece of your story, because we know that that took a lot of courage. And we also absolutely want you to know that we are always here to love and support you, and we will always have your back. And if you ever just need us for anything, even if it's just to say, hey, girls, I need your love and support or your prayers or anything, we're always here for you. So we are excited to learn from you tonight, and I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you. And thank you all, because I mean, every single one of you, plus those more that aren't on the call right now, sent me an amazing message or a comment or something. And so I really do appreciate that. And this team is a huge reason, why I was able to share, the big thing that I shared. So for the people that are listening in, I'll just recap real quick. But the video and the post and everything is on my pages. But I shared this weekend that I, 8.5 years ago, I got tested for Huntington's disease, which is a rare genetic neurological disease. And the reason that I got tested was because I grew up knowing about it. It was in my family. My grandma had it, and my dad actually has it right now. And so 8.5 years ago, I got tested, and I tested positive. And I never really hid that from anyone. I was always open when people asked about it. My family's always been active in the Huntington's community. We do fundraisers every year. Like growing up, it was just something that we did. We were involved in it. My mom's been a support group leader for as long as I can remember, and we did all the things. So it wasn't that, I didn't hide it, but I didn't openly talk about it. I mean, to the point where like I've sat on panels before and talked about my testing experience, but it was always just in that tight-knit disease community. So it was never really with anybody outside that community. But, as I've kind of been working through, I guess rewind slightly. I went through the testing 8.5 years ago. I went through counseling when I got tested, but I didn't really deal with it. I kind of, at that time in my life, just put it in a box and shoved it in the back of my closet, and I was fine. And, it's one of those, yeah, I'm fine, just fine. Everything's fine. Put on a face. I'm really, really good at that. So once I started, getting involved in Beachbody and this team and all this personal development, I started unpacking smaller boxes of things, as we all do, especially when you get into things like personal development, and you get into trying to understand why you do things or what made something happen or why you react to things. Like, it's kind of normal to start like, oh, I understand this about myself now because of, what you read or if you go to therapy or all those things. So I guess I fell in love with personal development. So like I would kind of call myself a junkie, when I read all the books, and I just kept getting deeper and deeper into personal development. And I think I just eventually started unpacking more and more of those little boxes until I finally got to that big ugly one in the back of my closet covered in cobwebs. And I just felt as I started kind of working through it myself, just like a lot of things, and I'm sure you guys can relate to it because you're all here as coaches, I just felt this pull that I needed to share this because for me, if I didn't have to go through, testing. A lot of people don't go through this genetic testing for Huntington's disease and for a lot of other diseases. It's obviously a really personal decision. I have 3 sisters, and myself and then my older half sister have been tested. My 2 younger sisters have not. So it's a really, personal choice. Some of the people in my family, my extended family, have been tested, but a lot haven't. So I didn't have to go through testing, but I just started feeling this pull that this knowing about it and having this more understanding of it, and I felt like that could mean something. I felt like it could mean something, just me having this disease. A lot of people don't know about it until they are diagnosed with symptoms of it. A lot of people, it's really something that's not talked a lot about. And a lot of families don't know about it until that first person has symptoms and is struggling with it. So a lot of families are like just thrown into it, completely unaware of what they're getting into or what to do. And so I just kept feeling this stronger pull that, this is my opportunity to make something of this. I guess for the first time, I felt like I could actually tell this story and I could write the story versus just letting the story, I guess, tell itself or something. I don't know. I didn't figure that one out yet. I shared the really hard thing, and I feel like I learned a lot in preparing to share it. So I kind of wanted to talk tonight about sharing some of those harder things, because I know we've talked on calls before, like that we shouldn't hide the hard things that happen in our lives. And Michelle did her talk a couple weeks ago. That was really awesome about her things that she's overcome with her health. And so I know we've talked about that. And I think it really is important. And I think it doesn't always have to be something huge. And so I made kind of some notes as I was going along, preparing to, I guess, share my hard, big thing. And so the first thing, that I think is important is I think we can be really on the fence. Like, we can think about, the hard things that happen to us. Is this really that? Is it really that hard? Is it really that important? Is somebody really going to care about it? But when you think that, I challenge you to think about somebody whose story impacted you and why it impacted you and how it impacted you and how it made you feel. Because that's what started my little seed, was somebody before me sharing her Huntington's story. Somebody that I had met that was in the Huntington's community, and she shared it. And from that point on, I think that was maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, like I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And it really impacted me and, gave me some courage to start working through my own crap with it. So, I think you never know who is out there listening. We see it when we're, getting, when we're talking with people, or when somebody sends you a message, asking what you're doing for your health that you've never talked to before, or hasn't liked any of your posts. It's like they come out of the woodwork, right? So I think you never know who's out there listening to you. And, that is something to keep in mind when you're thinking that, maybe this maybe this isn't that important. Like it could be to somebody, you don't know. So a couple of things, I made notes of like before you share. So before you share, I think it's really important to make sure you're sharing for the right reasons. Make sure you are sharing your story for you first. Like we want to inspire people and we want to impact people, but the story that you tell has to be it has to come from your heart, and it has to be something that is important to you, and it has to be authentic to you. I struggled with wanting to almost copy this other girl's presentation and how she shared her story, because I thought it was really great, and I wanted to mimic that. But every time I tried, it felt really wrong, because it wasn't my story. We both we both had Huntington stories, but they were completely different. And I am not her and she is not me. And so my story shouldn't look exactly like hers. I ended up, I always thought like, I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to plan this out. I'm going to have like a day and an outfit, and I'm going to have to get my hair cut, and I'm going to have to figure out how to put on makeup, and it's going to have to be like, perfect. And then I sat in my backyard in a shirt that I love with my dogs running around in the background, and I just talked to the camera, and I haven't had my hair cut in like a year now, and I haven't worn makeup in even longer. So, and that's what felt really right to me. And I was comfortable, and I felt like I was able to share more authentically because of all that, because I wasn't trying to be somebody else. The other thing is, embrace the vulnerability that you're feeling. That I think can be so hard, because vulnerability is really, that can be really scary. But I was listening in the podcast I was listening to today. It was a Brene Brown podcast, because she's all things vulnerability. They said, embrace vulnerability like the deeper waters calling you beyond the break, which made me think about Moana, because I have a 3-year-old. And it made me think all about Moana and feeling trapped on the shores and in the shallows and wanting to explore the deeper waters. And that's so what vulnerability is. It's scary, but it's also exciting and freeing once you get there. So, embrace that feeling. And then using personal development to understand some of your thoughts and getting curious and questioning your thoughts. That's been the biggest thing that has helped me, you guys, is leaning into personal development and being open to questioning everything that I've ever thought I knew about myself, or every thought that has crossed my mind. I started with the more introductory, I guess, the more beginner personal development books. And I just kind of kept going deeper and deeper and deeper. And I got to which I don't actually recommend to people unless they've been doing personal development for a while, because it was really hard for me at first when I first started the book. It was by Katie Byron. And I can't remember the title of it now, of course. But she basically talks about questioning your thoughts and how everything that you tell yourself is not necessarily true. And you can turn every single thought around. And she goes into some really deep scenarios. And I actually had to kind of pause for a little bit as I was reading the book, because she was going so deep. I was like, no, this is not right. But it really, really challenges you to question things that you have told yourself forever, things that you have believed forever. And that was really powerful for me. But using personal development, like when I when I am feeling off or I'm feeling some type of way, I use personal development to figure out how to work through it. So, I love I listen to all sorts of Audible books, but I listen to all sorts of podcasts too, because the thing I like most about podcasts is they're shorter and you can pick what you need for that day. Because what I need on Monday is different from what I need on Wednesday and is different from what I need on Friday. When I'm in a good mood, I listen to some of those really uplifting, like pep you up, like, hey girl, you're awesome, you're going to rock this. When I'm in a bad mood, I listen to Crime Junkies. I don't know. Listening to crime and murder podcasts apparently is something that I need on a bad day. But there are certain voices that help me out on certain days. Like I knew that I was going to do this call tonight. So I listened to Brene Brown like all day long because her voice just makes me feel like really calm and like I know what I'm doing. So I think it's really important to kind of explore personal development and explore new and different authors. I always make notes of people that I like the ones that they interview. So podcasters that interview other people that have books out and other podcasts and things like that, because it gives you a variety. I always write down these other people that I like when I listen to them interview, and then I just search them in podcasts and I listen to either other interviews they've done or I listen to their own podcast, because everybody has a podcast these days. If I'm struggling with something, like for a while, a couple of months ago, I really needed to work on my time management. So I just I put in the podcast search, like time management. When I was prepping myself for a review at work and I knew that I was going to, potentially be like raise talk and stuff like that, I searched podcasts about that. So you can really find a podcast about anything and just use it and figure out what you need, to feel on certain days. So those are my kind of before sharing tips. My tips for telling your story and while you're telling it. I already said, tell your story for you first. It's your story. You've got to tell it your way. Make sure you're ready in your heart and in your mind. If I had tried to share my story even a year ago, even 6 months ago, if I had tried to share this Huntington story, I would not have been ready for it. I still had work to do. My heart was not ready. My mind was not ready. And it would not have been as good. It would not have been as helpful for me, and therefore it wouldn't have helped other people as much. So just make sure that you're ready. The other thing to keep in mind, like, you don't have to share all of the details. I shared a lot of details, but I left a lot more out. I didn't talk about my dad in my story. I talked about my grandma, who she's passed away quite a few years ago. But I didn't talk about my dad because that's a piece of my story that I am still processing. My dad is still, he's still around. He's got the early symptoms of the disease. So he's showing symptoms, but he's still, functioning really well. And if you met him on the street, like, you wouldn't know, but we know because we know the disease and we know him. I didn't really talk about my dad yet because I am still processing a lot of things with my dad, and that's okay. I shared a lot without going into those details, and I shared the important things for now. And when I'm ready and when I've worked through it, I can, choose to share more of that if that's a place that I feel I need to share from. So you can control the details. You can share the things that people are going to relate to and that are going to help people without getting into some of those nitty gritties. You can share your feelings about, the thing. You can share your pain points. You can share the things that you do to help. You don't have to get specific if you're not ready to right now. And I think that's important to remember, because, we think that sometimes, I know for me, a lot of times there would be something that I would want to say, but I would feel like, well, if I say this, then I have to explain this, and then I have to explain this and this and this, and now I've just, word vomited on everybody, and I'm not ready yet. But you don't have to. You can share, the little pieces. The other thing is just thinking about who you might need to or want to talk to before you share. I know for me, I shared with you girls before I shared, which was really, really awesome, because that kind of built me up quite a bit and gave me the confidence to share publicly. But also I told my family, like, hey, this is what I'm going to share, tomorrow or later today or whatever. And I just want to let you guys know that. But also in doing that, making sure that you're not swayed by somebody that maybe doesn't want you to share. I was actually most nervous telling my parents that I was going to share that video, which is kind of odd now that I think about it, because we've been involved in this community forever. So it's not like people don't know about it. But, they're my parents. And, I was kind of worried about them being like, well, like, you shouldn't, like, that's personal. They're not on social media. Like, they don't kind of understand that. But I got like the most supportive text that I've ever gotten from my dad, which had me like crying in the fitting room at JCPenney. But also I shared with people first who I knew were going to support me. Like the very first person I shared that with was Caitlin. And I knew that she was going to support me, and I knew you girls were going to support me, and I knew my sister was going to support me. And I kind of eased my way along. And kind of you build that up. You build that up in your back pocket, and it gives you the confidence to share. And honestly, at that point, I felt like I had enough support that if my parents had been like, hey, we don't think you should share this, I felt like I would have been like, I appreciate that, but I'm going to anyway, because I had built that support up. So leaning into your support teams is like the biggest one. Like I talked to Caitlin about this, like, I don't know, like 2 months ago now, on a very long, late call. So just leaning into your support team, because it's going to give you confidence in what you're doing. It's going to make you feel good about what you're doing. And when you feel good, people are going to feel good because you feel good about it. Also, don't feel like you have to start with the biggest, ugliest box in your closet. You can work up. You can work through those smaller boxes, and you can start sharing those things that maybe feel smaller to you and maybe feel less significant to you, but are still going to reach somebody. So you don't have to start with the biggest one. You can, get more comfortable sharing little things that are hard, because everybody relates to some of those things. And then the biggest one is drop perfectionism. Your story doesn't have to be perfect. And this is coming from, I'm absolutely 1,000,000% a recovering perfectionist. I will label myself that forever now. But your story doesn't have to be perfect. Your presentation doesn't have to be perfect. Nothing about it has to be perfect. And that's because life isn't perfect. Like, life is messy. Life is complicated. This disease that I'm talking about is messy and complicated. And, it's okay for my story to reflect that. And so just, I guess the biggest thing is, perfection is fear. Perfectionism is our fear, holding us back. When I think about that, I think about like, who do I actually relate to? Like when I'm scrolling through Facebook or Instagram, Like, who do I actually relate to? Do I relate to the perfect person who's only ever sharing all of the happy things and the positive things and the good things? Or do I relate to the person who's real and honest and sharing the crap that's happening in their life and how they've overcome it? And like, you think about who you actually relate to and who you actually like are drawn to. And it's probably the person that's not putting out the perfect picture. So don't be afraid of that. You know, I spent so much time worrying about like having the perfect picture. Like me personally, I feel like I'm pretty good with words, and I can craft posts. Like, that piece of coaching is really comes naturally to me. Like, I'm wordy. But I have a really hard time with the pictures, and that, you know, just taking them, getting the, you know, I've listened to all the things about the lighting and the equipment and the everything, listened to all the tips. And I would have so many days where I would have a perfect post. And by perfect, I mean like perfect for me, because it was just me and it was there. And I just wouldn't share it because I wouldn't have a picture to go with it. Like I wouldn't have a good enough picture to go with it. And I'm just like, that's so silly. Like it's really so silly. Like, that I would get so hung up on this thing. So that's kind of a little bit of a tangent, but for me, it was just dropping that. Like, you know, it's okay if some of my posts have a picture that's just my sweaty selfie, because the words are there and the heart is there. And like, yeah, we don't want to do the same thing every day and only ever do the one thing, but like, it's okay that I don't have, you know, I hate getting dressed up and putting on makeup. Like, that's not me. Like, I seriously have, the only makeup I have bought in probably the last 10 years. Okay, I think I maybe bought some for our Christmas party like 3 years ago. I bought some lipstick and a new tube of mascara. See, I don't even know what you call it, but that's, I bought mascara and lipstick, like two things of it maybe in the last 10 years. Like, that's not me. And that's okay. And it's okay for me to share me, because that's what people are going to relate to. People are going to relate to me, and they're going to see when I'm comfortable, and they're going to see when I'm sharing from my heart. So don't be afraid to be you, and don't be afraid to share your story, because you will impact somebody. You know, I have been impacted by pieces of all of your guys' story. Yeah, I think that's all I have for tonight. I guess any questions? I'm gonna have to look up the name of that book now. It's in my Audible.
Yeah, you'll have to let us know.
I know it's in here. It's called Loving What Is by Katie Byron. And you definitely have to be ready and with an open mind. I will say that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing and being so open and vulnerable and just everything. You're amazing and such an inspiration to everybody. And we so appreciate you putting it out there and leading by example and sharing how you've kind of worked through that to get to where you can share that, because it's amazing.
Thank you. I'm like serious. Like, you guys have been the biggest help. Just you know, knowing that I've got all these awesome people in my corner, and that, you know, we all have our baggage, and you know, I really do believe it's what pulled me into coaching, and it's what's pulling me to share, you know, my Huntington story, is the power of sharing. Like, I can't even think about where I would be if it hadn't been for other people sharing their stories and impacting me. And I just feel so strongly that there's this pay it forward, you know, no matter what your story is, no matter what you're going through or have been through, there's just that opportunity to and if it helps one person, like, that's worth it.
Yes. That ripple effect for sure.
Yeah.
All right, girls. Well, thank you, Katie. Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for being on tonight. I will get the recording up shortly. Does anybody have any questions or any final thoughts before we wrap it up for the night? No? Just a big round of applause for Katie because that was really awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we love you. And I'm so excited to finally meet you in person at Summit, right? Everybody, all of us get together. I can't wait.